of topicality. I'm going to introduce Deb Runyon up next. She's going to read a piece in the Almanac by Bonnie Beatson called First Shot, the Secret Submarine Attack on Pearl Harbor. So I thought I'd move it up for a continuity's sake to get a Pearl Harbor duo. Deb will be reading, but I'll read the bio for Bonnie Beatson, the author. And I know it's on here. Oh, there it is. Originally from St. Paul, Minnesota, Bonnie Beatson has lived in Hawaii since 1973. After working as a graphic designer for over 20 years, she returned to college to earn her bachelor's degree in visual communications from Hawaii Pacific University. First Shot was her final project, a historical documentary about the secret submarine attack on Pearl Harbor, co-produced with fellow students and friends in St. Paul, the USS Arizona Memorial Association, and the United States Navy. The film appeared at the Minnesota Historical Society in Hawaii and on Minnesota television and has won several awards. Bonnie is currently the Marketing and Public Relations Director at the University of Hawaii Windward Community College.
Bonnie sends her regrets that she isn't reading herself. First Shot, the secret submarine attack on Pearl Harbor. Most people think Pearl Harbor was attacked from the air, but there's another story. The U.S. Navy was short of men in 1941. 85 reservists, most from St. Paul, gained their seagoing experience on the frigid waters of Lake Superior. The young reservists were called to duty on a modernized World War II destroyer based in San Diego. Pardon me, that's a World War I destroyer. Pulled from 2 decades of mothballs, the USS Ward was updated, fast and efficient, and bound for Pearl Harbor. Will Lehner of St. Paul was only 17 years old when he joined the U.S. Naval Reserves, thinking it was a good outfit and I could go on a cruise. He was aboard the Ward patrolling Pearl Harbor as first loader on a No. 4 gun and had never fired a live round of ammunition until that fateful day. When the U.S. Pacific Fleet moved out to the Hawaiian Islands in 1940, it became clear to the Japanese that this was a threat. Japan believed that if they eliminated the Pacific Fleet, they could take control of oil interests in Southeast Asia, which they depended upon for expanding their empire. The Hawaii Operation Surprise Attack plan was launched. It was Kichidewa's job on December 7, 1941, to release the midget sub clamped piggyback style on the I-16 mother submarine. The 78-foot-long, 2-man midget submarine carrying a pair of 16-inch torpedoes was Japan's top-secret weapon. It was one of 5 submarines designed to sneak into the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor and attack the Pacific Fleet. At 6:40 a.m. on a typically beautiful Sunday morning in Honolulu, the Ward discovered the midget submarine trailing the USS Antares as it entered the mouth of Pearl Harbor. The suspicious vessel, painted dark green and covered in moss, had no identification, no flag, no insignia. General quarters was sounded, and the Ward accelerated, bearing down on the submarine at 25 knots. By 6:45, Lieutenant William Outerbridge, on his second day as the Ward's commander, gave the order. 2 shots were fired. The first shot missed, but the second shot, at a range of 50 yards, was a solid hit right through the small, oval-shaped conning tower about the size of a car door. The submarine sank in 1,200 feet of water. I stood on the starboard side of the ship and saw it go down right underneath the ship, right below me, going down, Lehner said. He added, "I've never seen anything like that before." It was more than an hour before the air attack on Pearl Harbor when the ward sent the message to Naval Headquarters in Honolulu. "We have attacked, fired upon, and dropped depth charges upon submarine operating in defensive sea area." The St. Paul Naval Reservists' eyewitness accounts were met with disbelief. It was a warning that could have changed history, and the response was, "Confirm." "I don't know why they didn't believe us," St. Paul veteran Dick Phil said. 60 years later, in 2002, the University of Hawaii's Undersea Research Laboratory, HURL, discovered the sunken midget submarine, providing proof and closure for World War II veterans like Will Lehner and Kichi Dewa, and also led to a friendship between the two men who were once enemies. Upon reflection, Terry Kirby, chief submarine pilot for HURL, said, "The most rewarding thing for us is the veterans we've met and the closure it has brought." My college classmates and I produced the historical documentary First Shot, The Secret Submarine Attack on Pearl Harbor. We were determined to set the record straight for the St. Paul survivors of the USS Ward and the rest of the world. To tell this story from both sides, we traveled from Hawaii to interview veterans in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Kuroshiki, Japan. As student writer and the one responsible for conducting interviews, I was able to connect with my hometown community, which was personally very meaningful. The St. Paul veterans became like family to me. We filmed at the Minnesota Historical Society and at Ember's Restaurant, one of the places in town where the First Shot naval vets had been meeting for the past 50 years, and at the ward's number 3 gun, now stationed on the State Capitol Mall. We wanted to preserve the memories of the St. Paul reservists who fired the first shot at Pearl Harbor. There can only be one first shot. It was rewarding for me as well because I got involved and I got to be PA and help with the process. And our friend Roy here, he was narrator on the documentary. So next, I'd like to read my piece called "Circus Girls." I could not read the book I brought along. In front of me were a dozen circus arts classes, each made up of 4 to 10 kids between the ages of 6 and 21, practicing for their spring show. I had joined the parent viewing area to watch my son practice at the Circus Juventus Big Top in Highland Park. I tried to act like the other parents. Sure, some glanced up from time to time, but most were buried in their laptops, books, and cell phones. I tried to read, but I found myself reading the same paragraph over and over. Look at that tiny child, that blur of leotard and toes flipping and flying through the air, then landing in a perfect stance. And that one, moving so gracefully up the Spanish web. The girls on the hoops were rotating in unison when one child gets a gentle correction from the coach from Mongolia. The jugglers are throwing and catching and missing and laughing and setting themselves serious again. My arms hurt from my imagined climb up the Spanish web. I was mesmerized watching the tumblers twist and vault through the air. I felt an adrenaline rush as the bungee jumpers fell from the rigging to somersault back onto the trapeze. I was breathless when the boy in low casting reached for the trapeze coming at him and missed, falling into the fluffy stacks of mats below him. I went home elated and exhausted. So I joined the circus. I found out there was an adult class and talked my 40-something friend into joining the 50-something me. It will be so much fun, I told her. I was surprised when, no, we wouldn't have our very own private session. Instead, we joined swarms of whirling children and their coaches from all over the globe. My friend glared at me, and I gave her an I guess I should have checked it out first shrug. When we looked at the others in our class, most of them were in their 20s. We can do this, I whispered. Feeling self-conscious in our semi-leotard and sweatpants ensemble, I glanced at the parent viewing area where heads were buried in laptops, books, and cell phones. Yay! As soon as we figured out we didn't have to go as far or fast or as often as our contemporaries, we settled into enjoying ourselves. Each session brought a new circus art to try out. I desperately tried to feel the gracefulness I had witnessed from the galley when I finally hoisted myself onto the hoop. All I felt was dizzy. "Stop twirling me," I cried. "Open your eyes," called the coach from Moscow. Somehow I managed to climb up the Spanish web, clinging to the prickly twine that was unforgiving, scared to let go. My attempt at low casting took many tries and falls on that not-so-fluffy mat before I grabbed hold of the trapeze. The silks were way too slippery and much harder to climb than they looked. The bungee jump was exhilarating, but I never could pull myself back up onto the trapeze, so I just bounced and somersaulted. Not one of us pedaled that unicycle. Every week, my brave friend and I dragged our still sore from the previous week bodies back to the big top. The smell of sweaty socks, the sound of giggles and groans, and the sight of parents nestled into their own projects. My triumph came the week I finally did a cartwheel on the tumble track. I was thrilled, never having cartwheeled as a kid. I didn't care if the parents noticed.